Hello on YouTube, on Twitch. Welcome to another episode of my HOI4 Let's Play series. This is Northstar. I hope you're well. Are taking care of each other and being kind to yourselves. For those new to my channel, welcome. Returning viewers, welcome back. Apologies, I got kind of on in a very Fuchs on YouTube. I got on in a very long discussion with a, well, it was pretty long as far as my discussions go. On Twitch, a viewer from Mexico was trying to summarize the entirety of U.S. politics since 1800, as in a little bit after the country formed, in a single sitting, and I think I nearly gave myself a stroke. I got so stressed out over it. It's not just that these things are upsetting, which some of them are, it's that with my long COVID, it's very, very hard to focus on something that requires using my memory or my brain like at that level for very long, and to try and power through it, to focus really hard. Usually I physically can't do it. My brain just cannot remember stuff, but sometimes, like today, I can if I try really hard, but my blood pressure goes through the roof, and I don't know. It doesn't work well. I tried so hard to push through the memory limitations and the difficulty focusing this disease, and it was too much. So I need to take it a little easier, or you won't have anyone to watch because I'll stroke out. Anyways, mainly I think it was just that it was a stressful topic, and I was kind of meandering because I couldn't have discussed it in a disciplined way the way I could before long COVID. Anyways, the air war is extremely important, and somehow the Soviets are winning the air war against the US. I've been thinking about how this is, and I think it's partly that the Americans are actually using tactical bombers and heavy fighters due to range, and so they're trading poorly. And they probably, even though they're outnumbered, have relatively more ICs, but the Soviets outnumber them in the Baltic, like 2-1. They've occasionally tagged over the Soviets before. They're trading pretty well. The Soviets have done an impressively good job of fighter design, better than the Americans actually have. And the Soviet cast is pretty bad garbage, which is also historically accurate. The Soviets actually developed very good fighters like the MiG in the very late war, early post-war years. Like the early MiGs were very good. The air designer was considered by many to be a genius. Some of the early Soviet air designers in like that period, around 1945 to 1950. And I guess the AI is programmed to have some pretty good things. The Americans rely on like P-51s and stuff, and they're good fighters. Don't get me wrong, the American fighters are not bad. But I don't think that's what they're using in the Baltic because of range limitations. I think they're flying over heavy fighters, and the American heavy fighters are pretty cost ineffective. And then they're fighting Soviet light airframes, and they're losing. You can kind of see the stuff here. The Americans also got a lot of their aircraft chewed up fighting over the Swiss Alps. And they're fighting over France as well. The point is somehow the Soviets are actually contesting the skies. And I can see this now that I've got air volunteer agreements with some of the Central Powers. It lets me see what the air war looks like in the areas that are over the ones who agreed. Like the Austrians said no, so I can't really see what it looks like over France. And yeah, the Central Powers might win this World War, and there's going to be a World War III after World War II here. The Soviets will probably lead the Central Powers. The British Communist Alternative will still be around, and for a while. I doubt. What am I saying? If they lose if Central Powers win, they'll conquer the UK. But Soviets will probably lead the faction. I'll probably lead the Central Powers with the Soviets, and it'll be a communist versus monarchist war. The Central Powers were alliances convenience, and Turkey is fascist, and they have focuses that will actually involve them leading the faction and trying to conquer Bulgaria and stuff. So this is not a permanent peace. Also, there's King China that has to be dealt with, although once Kazakhstan joins the British Communist Alternative, there'll be a land war in Asia, and someone's going to win it. Whether it's the Americans fighting alongside the Queen Chinese, or the Queen Chinese getting conquered by the Communist Chinese, which is Sin Kai-ing. It's not Mao, which he actually has, because he gets the warlord, not national spirits, and then he gets the Communist China focus. Although he doesn't get Mao's bonus, cornered fox, or arguably Sin Kai-ing makes a better communist leader than Mao does, and that's without the Gobi Gambit, which I don't think the Soviet Union can do because they don't control certain key states. They have to control Altai and Kazakhstan, which actually they'll eventually control both those. So at some point they may be able to run the Gobi Gambit, although I'll check the focus requirements in a second. Fighter design. I've been designing new fighters. Look at them. The Fighter Mark 8 is actually slightly less industrial efficiency than Mark 7, even accounting for the reduced aluminum costs. It's less agile, but it's more heavily armed. It's slower. This is, it's more heavily armed. It's got a defense turret instead of armor plating because the armor plating was reducing. Or no, instead it has a defense turret instead of drop tanks, because armor plating would have reduced the range too much and it need extra air defense because of non-strategic materials. This works around the aluminum shortages, and given how bad the aluminum shortages are getting to be, the Fighter Mark 8 is always slightly less cost effective than the Mark 7, given that the 2 rubber is worth about 3, or sorry, 3 aluminum, sorry, 2 aluminum is worth about 3 rubber, or a little more than 3 rubber, in terms of really how much it affects production, how accessible it is. Like, I'm having to buy rubber at increased cost, like 5 aluminum per factory or 4, and then on top of that, I'm still running at production deficits most of the time. I think I just reduced my demand, but I need to buy less aluminum because I desperately need factories. I need to buy less resources, period, so I can finish my anti-air guns and stuff. At least the ones over my capital where my steel production is, because I can't afford that infrastructure to get bombed. And I need a port, and yeah, I know it's expensive investments. I probably could get by without it if I just did air supply over the Jutland Peninsula. But that would rely on producing more aircraft, and I'm already short in aluminum. And I'm not entirely confident the Central Powers will win. If I have to face the US, I want good infrastructure and stuff, so I'm a builder at heart, even when it doesn't make a lot of sense strategically. I have to constantly say, no, I can do without that, or I can do with less of that thing I want to build. I've always been a builder at heart. Anyways, the Mark 8 fighters will slowly phase out. The Mark 7, I mean, is just a slight upgrade of the Mark 6. It's just higher agility. Same in production costs and stuff. I'm going to slowly phase out the Mark 7 for the Mark 8, and then Mark 7 will come obsolete. The cast Mark 7 have no dive brakes. They have a shorter range. They're also going to get slowly phased out with a long range, because it's starting to be that the number of aircraft that exist are crowding out air bases nearest where the air wars are occurring, and so the range is becoming more necessary to send casts from neighboring air zones. As that starts to become more common. And what these have is dive brakes instead of armor plating, which actually makes them slightly less agile. Not that that matters when they're doing casts. Their agility is non-existent. More expensive, importantly though, and these pure casts, but longer range. So I think the range is necessary. Also, oil, I can't afford to keep buying the oil I need if I start to enter the air war myself. Sending volunteers instead of sending fighters at least, I'm going to need more oil. So it's going to become more quality over quantity just because I can't afford to fuel more cost-effective but more numerous aircraft. So, which is also part of the reason for the Mark 8 fighter. It's more expensive than the Mark 7, but it's more heavily armed, so it promotes more intense air war. and it will suffer more losses while dealing more damage, so I won't have it to fuel as many of them, because they'll die quicker. But they'll take down enough American aircraft with them to be worth dying quicker a little bit. And the aluminum thing means I can import less aluminum. So the combination of importing less aluminum and dying quicker while taking down more stuff with them makes them just slightly better. Yeah. And yeah, so and then eventually I'll phase out the Mark 8 cast for the Mark 10 fighter bomber. The trainer fighter bomber is essentially a Mark 9. I like to figuratively think of it that way. Although, it's actually called that if I enable the dynamic numbering. That's perfect. So the trainer fighter bomber, the Mark. Yeah, I'm switching from pure cast to fighter bomber cast. It does a lot less damage because instead of heavy bomb logs, they have rockets. But these things, and I'll show with this because it's got well, this is actually has higher performance. Wait a second. I thought this was the trainer. Oh yeah, no, it does have 2 armor plating and has 1 die breaks, so that the range isn't complete garbage. Yeah, it says self-sealing fuel tanks, which are more expensive, but worth it with the non-trainers, and it has defense turret instead of armor, so that has a greater range. I couldn't do extra fuel tanks, drop tanks, because it would have not left enough space for air defense. But anyways, so air defense is, yeah, it's a little greater on this. And anyways, 23.4 doesn't sound like out of air defense, but when my air support mission efficiency will be 75%, which means this is about 15. Or what I'm saying, I should be able to hit 1/4, which is alright. 1648. Around 120 agility. Just ballpark it. A little over 120 agility when on cast missions. It's gonna dodge almost everything that gets shot at it, and it has a similar 75% buff to air defense and attack. These things don't really need escorts that badly, and they'll still get escorts from the pure fighters, which I'm going to have to unleash to the Soviets because I just don't have the oil to keep, or the manpower with the way I keep training divisions, and now I'm producing battle cruisers, which require a lot of manpower. I have 2 battle cruisers in production, each of which requires 6,000 men. They will be done a lot sooner in 1953, once the current round of subs and destroyers are done. That should be, instead of 5 years, in 1 year in 1949, so the war's definitely still be on then. This is it has the lowest level battlecruiser armor. It's only got 1 set of heavy guns, and it's not even level 4, it's level 3. And its engines aren't even at the highest level. It relies very, very heavily on just soaking up enemy nav attacks with the other ships in the fleet. My fleet's eventually going to feature 2 battlecruisers, 2 carriers that were cruiser converted carriers, which are very, very, very vulnerable to naval bombing, which is why I need these battlecruisers, and then just a whole mess of light cruisers and destroyers. And I could do some heavy cruisers, some lightly armed heavy cruisers, but heavy cruiser guns require more steel, so I can use I can use advanced dual purpose medium batteries, or I could use level 1 heavy cruiser guns, I think, or maybe level 2. I forget which, and it would require more steel for the heavy cruiser guns, and yeah, it would have worse performance in terms of ship-to-ship combat, even with screening bonuses, I'm pretty sure. And it would definitely... I want a very, very high number of screens, because if this fleet ever goes into combat, I expect to lose most of my screens in the first couple of fights. Whereas I expect the 2 battlecruisers and the carriers to hopefully make it away alive and live to see another day. So I'm not going to be able to replace screens as fast as I lose them if I end up in naval battles. But yeah, hopefully the battlecruisers and the carriers will act as a fleeting being and not actually see combat for the most part. But if there's a port strike, I'll need anti-air capabilities, and the destroyers are not going to be able to provide that. They're gonna get massacred if nav target them. And if the fleet is, well, screens don't get targeted if there's capital ships. It's fleet is entirely screening ships, then the screens will still get targeted, obviously, because there's nothing else to target. So yeah, because my navy takes so much fuel, pure fighters go to Soviets. The AI knows how to use pure fighters, but they don't know how to use fighter bombers. I'll use these as air volunteers myself. And the pure cast also goes to the Soviets, though it eventually gets phased out, as you can see. The nav will eventually need to be given self-sealing fuel tanks. I mean, I expect a very, very long time until there's much contention with enemy fighters over the sea. Probably after the Americans have been pushed out of the Middle East, and maybe the Soviets have marched into Finland, though they'll have to do a naval invasion. Maybe in the North Atlantic, or maybe in the Baltic, if Sweden is still holding on, and probably will still be. I'm not even sure the Soviets, it's going to be a long time before they can even pull off a naval invasion of Helsinki. They could invade Karelia, but they won't. It doesn't seem they're interested in fighting them, and I've been buffing Karelia as a possible fallback to play as. Knowing the Soviets probably weren't going to invade them. In case the Central Powers lose, I've been like having them managing their industry and general recruitment so that they're not as incompetent as the AI would normally be. I even gave them a little bit of free command power because they've been wasting their command power before I did it, not hiring generals, just to hire random generals, and occasionally they roll a brilliant strategist, so it's worth it. Very marginal. Builder at heart. I know it's technically not legit. But yeah, if this war goes on long enough and the Americans start showing up with modern airframes and supersonics, these nav, I'm gonna want to start producing nav with self-sealing fuel tanks for a little more air defense for the rare occasions where they do get caught by fighters at sea, which will still be pretty rare, but they'll absolutely get slaughtered. Something like this. Something like this will get slightly less slaughtered. They'll still get slaughtered, but it's about limiting the losses on the rare occasions, and I'll avoid getting caught by fighters at sea whenever I can with the nav. They're designed mainly to just be cheap and have lots of agility so they don't get massacred by naval anti-air. Agility is the only stat that reduces losses to naval anti-air. Air defense doesn't matter at all, neither does speed. So I'll eventually be phasing out these nav is the point, but that's a low priority. Scout planes eventually will be upgraded to probably advanced scout planes and given self-sealing fuel tanks, maybe. Or, you know what? No, I can't afford the limit of that, but they'll probably eventually be given guns when they're spying on countries that I'm at war with. Then I'll no longer need the benefit from the unarmed recon plane ability to spy on neutral countries. I'll be, if I'm doing recon on nations at war with, then giving them a few guns will help them at least retaliate when they get shot at. Might switch to actually defense turrets, because armor plates don't work great on medium aircraft. Like, they can actually get the same air, They can actually get more air defense with cannon defense turrets. But it's more expensive. Yeah. So right now my scout planes are just heavily armored, but eventually they'll get defense turrets, maybe even main guns. Probably not main guns, actually. They don't have the agility to use them very cost effectively. They're currently just a little more agile, that are about on par with most American fighters. But if I start doing, like, they're already slower. Let's say I do a couple defense turrets, and then like, oh, I'll throw in light machine guns because I want to give them a little. Let's say just do this. Still looking at 40 agility. Let's say, boom, 40.2. All right. So yeah, they're slower, but they might get some guns so they can defend themselves. Weight exceeds thrust. Weight exceeds thrust. Oh. And then I end up having to upgrade the engines. And you can see it's starting to become a lot more expensive. Can't be using a scout roll because it's armed. That's right. Which means I end up having to do recon as a secondary. Yeah. It works, but if I remove the guns in the secondary, I guess they can have defense turrets, just not main. So I'd probably start with this. But it's a lot more expensive. And it's only going to be used if they're in really hostile air. And I need the extra defense of the cannon defense turrets, and I need, I probably want to do a little retaliation. But I'm already spending so much on a plane. Won't see that much of a reduction in overall number output to add a few light machine guns on. And that turns them into heavy fighter wings, so instead of wings of 10, they become wings of 100, which is actually better in some ways. Because then they're not constantly dropping down to green when they suffer like 2 losses in a particularly bad fight. Even 1 loss is, yeah. So yeah, scout planes eventually get, I'll probably have a better scout plane design at some point. I'm not sure exactly why. Probably starting with defense turrets. Nav will get phased out. The pure casts will get phased out and for first the longer range ones, and then in favor of fighter bombers. And I'll keep giving the pure fighters, the Soviets, the Mark 8 for a very long time, probably. It'll be one of the last things to go. Because some amount of pure fighters, the AI will use lots of pure bombers to get massacred without escorts, so the pure fighters will be necessary. And the pure fighters do a better job in the role of, well, actual combat than do fighter bombers. These operate without escorts, but they don't provide effective escort things that need it, like tactical bombers. So if I can't control the rest of the faction, they're going to produce things that need escorts, so these will still see operation for a while. They will get replaced when modern airframes come into being. Is when this will probably get replaced. Escort. I was to get escort disruption thing a while ago. Escort attack, agility, and speed reduce disruption, and of course attack will help with shooting down enemy fighters. You have the detection to actually see them. But yeah, just a handful of these, they have very high attack, so they can... And if they're not active as escorts, if they're in an air zone where there's no bombers, they trade very well with enemies. But yeah, I expect most air zones there's bombers, so they'll get murdered because their air defense could be higher. And when you do escort missions, you make yourself fully visible, which means you're going to get hit a lot more than you're going to hit the enemy. Unless you have radar or something in the air zone, which... I think the Soviets are actually building radar stations in some places. I was surprised to see. I don't see where. I'm looking around and this is a whole bunch of level... They have the tech, but I haven't seen... Maybe I'm wrong. I would have sworn I saw radar stations in some of these zones. Oh, there's one in... Yeah, it's the Austrians built one. There's at least a few radar stations smattered around. This is probably part of why the Central Powers are winning the air wars, because they have radar. And the Americans are fighting like these aircraft. The 661 fighters versus 1181 Central Power. They're probably coming down from Finland, Sweden, which means they're mostly heavy fighters, or air superior numbers don't support, well, mission efficiency. That's probably why. They're more numerous, but that will mission. Would that work that way? I think it does. I think the number here is a number even before accounting for mission efficiency reduction. I could be wrong. But, could just be a tech different. I'm not sure. All I know is that they seem to be getting murdered more than the Americans are losing the air war. And that's really surprising, because if you look at the industry in this war, it's become way more even than it used to be. 1.43 to 1.76k. Yeah, they used to outproduce the Central Powers like 3 to 1. Now it's like more like 3 to 2. Wow, I'm not sure what happened. The balance of industry has shifted distinctly. It's probably going to continue shifting. Considering they still have Iran to occupy and the Levant, and then Iraq, which is part of Central Powers, will invade Egypt. And I think Libya and Tunisia as well. Yep. And Algeria. She's going to march all the way to Morocco. There's going to be a North African war going from Egypt. Yeah. It's a really late World War II, but it's World War II that in some way recapitulates some of the historical conflicts. And as nations fought communists, they joined the war on the side of the Americans, actually, because the British are fighting alongside them, and the British invite anyone who goes communist. So my agents are actually... my Lend-Lease benefits the Central Powers, but my agents technically hurt them in a way, except that these nations flip and they get immediately occupied, usually. So if I'm careful about it, I didn't have much to do with Kazakhstan getting this communist. I gave them maybe 1% support for it before my agents had to go elsewhere. I haven't even started in the Far Eastern Republic yet. I had nothing to do with Altai. Let's see, I flipped the People's Commune of the Rhine. That was my doing. Other countries that my agents were responsible for flipping. Thuringen, the People's State of Thuringen, which actually joined the American faction instead of the British, surprisingly. Even though they went communist. Communist nations much more willing to join the war. I'm responsible for this getting high enough. Some of the Volga German Workers' Union, their flipping is due to me as well. And Ukraine, I flipped that. So Ukraine, Volga, Germany, Thuringen, and the Rhineland, and I'm working on Occitania. It's going to take a very long time. And in the Far Eastern Republic, Kazakhstan was not really my doing, but it's flipping anyways. And Altai was not really my doing, but it's flipping. Which means there's going to be a front here with the Central Powers right into. And Mongolia and Tanatuva, they don't like the Soviets very much. And I don't think they like Austria, but they might join the war once the Central Powers are marched right their borders. They might remain neutral, I'm not sure. I'm saying they might join the British Communist Alternative, which they have no... Well, no, these are programmed to be Stalinist. Not Mongolia, just Tanatuva. Okay. Yeah, I don't know. There's some strategic AI things they normally are with the Soviet Union historically. But the Soviet Civil War causes them to lose the Comintern, and then they consider the Soviet Union a faction traitor. Even though, yeah, it was Trotsky who started the Civil War, it makes sense a little bit if it's Trotsky wins, but they don't like Trotsky. But Stalin won the Civil War against Trotsky, and they still won't side with the Soviets again, or have anything to do with them, and they don't particularly like the British either. So I'm not sure they'll join the war. Which I guess means I could try for a Tanutuva world conquest if I get horribly pwned. In a world that's mostly controlled by the Americans, that's not going to happen. That's a joke. I'm not that sadistic to myself. That's not masochistic. Sadistic is like hurting others. I'm not that masochistic. I'm not sadistic at all. I despise people. I'm not that masochistic. There's no way I try for a Tanutuva world conquest. If I can't hack it as Denmark, I may switch to Turkey or Afghanistan, and those because they're more substantial powers. Afghanistan gets a war goal on Pakistan, very easy. Or did they already get it? No. But importance of war goal focuses is they usually are too quick for the major democratic nations to guarantee. If they can wipe out Pakistan quickly, which would probably require paratroopers. A point is, if it plays Afghanistan, might be able to annex Pakistan. I think they can even core them, and they can. Pakistan has a claim in Kashmir. If I puppet, they also have focus to flip communist. If I flipped communist, annex Pakistan, and then puppeted at least some of Pakistan, maybe all. I'm not sure they can core it. Let's see. They can core it if they peacefully annex it. No, oh no, it is a core if they. Okay, but still, don't have to annex it all. Create a puppet, and the reason why is Pakistan has a claim, but not a core on Kashmir, so it won't. Then I could feed Pakistan Kashmir, or calling them into the war on them, and they would have better compliance than if I occupied myself. And then using this base of operations, I would have to eat up some of these Central Asian countries, at which point the U.S. might be able to have Pakistan as let them keep the coastline and not call them into those wars, so that the Americans can't invade them because they're a neutral country. It's kind of gamey, but very, very hard. It's a fallback if I really want to punish myself, but I'm not. Conquering the world is Afghanistan hard. Conquering Tanutuva, impossible. No. Turkish, it's people have done it through gimmicks and cheese, but you have to start in 1936, not 49 or wherever it be. It could also try as Turkey, especially because they can flip communist pretty easily. Or it could stay fascist with them, but if they flip communist, it's mostly roleplay, but they also can carve out generic puppets to get more manpower, like Bulgaria, which is possibly very important. And if the Central Powers lost, they would have been forced democratic, so they wouldn't actually be fascist. And I think it's easier for them to flip communist because they have a spirit that feeds them. This guy will be gone, and I think he's removed his advisor when they're no longer fascist. They have 0.05 daily communism drift, and I think they only have 0.03 fascism. So it's actually, plus they'd have lost so much manpower that ideological loyalty would help rebuilding the army. And they also get decisions that feed them manpower, so I wouldn't have to wait. Ideological loyalty is too slow. That would be like, I'm going to play till 1970 as Turkey, but they're much more doable in Afghanistan in terms of building an empire, conquering the world into the age of nuclear weapons and ignoring the fact they get nuked over and over. Like, it's going to be a really nasty World War III, but I could try it. But most likely I just give up if it conquers Denmark. And go back to day 0 save and try and take Denmark down its loyalist path to Norwegian People's Republic. Much more aggressive campaign than this one has been. Far more aggressive. Which you guys will get to see. I know this has been a slow campaign. That will be a much faster campaign because it involves taking down Sweden and Norway before, and really, to make the most of it, Finland before they can join the US faction. I'm not sure Iceland is doable with how hard it is to do. What am I saying? You get the Norwegian Navy. Danish get some decent focuses. They actually start with coastal defense ships, so they're very mid-range. It might require taking down Scotland first, but that would, and hoping the Americans don't guarantee him, but it's probably possible to reach Iceland if I'm really aggressive. I'm not sure I would be aggressive enough for Iceland. They'll probably come American puppet and peace out, but as a loyalist Denmark, we definitely do Norway and Sweden, probably do Finland. And that would mean a substantial base of power to then eat up the German states, eventually end up in whatever World War II develops. Try not to trigger it too soon, because getting stomped by the US before I'm ready would be not fun. Which means putting a lot of political power into justifying countries that I don't intend to actually go to war with and not running focuses so that I can do that faster than the Americans, because they will cancel guarantees now so that you don't, like, because you used to see people give them to guarantee like 4 nations, and then their 5th guarantee is 125 political power, and you can easily exceed that. Now they're like, okay, I'm guaranteeing 4, I'm going to cancel one of them. And they can stay ahead of it if you're running focuses, but if you run no focuses, your focus, air quote, is justifying on random nations. And because they'll cancel it, it's not like they can guarantee the whole world. Each guarantee is 25 political power more expensive than the last, so they really can only guarantee a handful of nations at a time. If there's only one major democratic, which Occitania becomes a major at some point through their industry, I think around 1937 or 8. But before Canada forms its faction with the US, which happens around 1940 to 41, and the US doesn't actually wake up until around that time when the Mexico invades and the faction with Canada. So Occitania should be possible to roll through in that version. Go through the German states, roll through Orleanist France. It wouldn't even be Orleanist at that point. Roll through France, roll through Belgium, conquer Occitania. At that point, who's going to stop me? The Americans are probably woken up by then, but it'd have everything up through Spain, Republican Spain, which would be, it could be a fun game and very aggressive and very different than this. I'll have to suppress my urge to run in industrial techs and, you know, get tanks in a reasonable amount of time instead. Wait, low, oh, okay. I'm like, why is it telling me bases are on low in supply? I don't have any aircraft here, but I could. So it's telling me if I sent them the supply is terrible. Alright, well, I talk too much about strategy. I do this too often when I'm not. I need to be disciplined and focused. I think it's partly that I'm in a family cabin because of a roommate who wants to murder me because of my cough. Out of state, and trying to buy as much time as I can. So if I'm forced to go back and the landlord doesn't seem like he's getting rid of the guy, if he makes a serious violent move on me, hopefully I can get him arrested or removed, but I'm not trusting the police in this or the courts. They gave him a verbal warning, then they basically gave him the equivalent of a written warning. Third strike, they might finally arrest him and then release. It might not be till like, at some point he's just going to escalate to actually trying to kill me before they put him in prison or kick him out of the apartment, I suspect. So it's a matter of buying time until I can win my Social Security case. This disease makes it very hard to focus to operate, and my energy is terrible. Then I can move to a different state that's much lower cost of living. A different part of the country than where I live. Or even the same state in a more rural area, just not. If I have a guaranteed income, I may be able to find a very, very cheap home somewhere in a middle of nowhere. Of course, not having internet reaches more rural America than ever before, but I probably have to put aside budget some for salary in it if I want to keep trying to grow my channel to where I can monetize it. It'd be a real pain to upload stuff. God, America needs broadband internet in rural areas, but it still doesn't have it. Most of it better than before, but it's very slow because every time the government puts money into giving, basically happens every time is they give Comcast a pile of money and then Comcast just takes the money and doesn't build the broadband, and some of the other companies, but Comcast is the really worst offender in this regard. It's people call it crony capitalism, but it's the nature of capitalism. Capitalism is nasty, and corporations won't do anything unless they're forced to, and they have regional monopolies, so nobody can force them to do anything. If the government just gives them money, they won't do it. The government basically has to force them to say, we will nationalize you if you don't. Here's money to build the broadband. If you don't do it, we will nationalize you, and you will not get paid for it because you broke the agreement. Companies might not even take that deal. If they actually have to do the work, they might say no. They actually prefer it this way with terrible internet in rural areas, because then they'll wait for the next administration, then they'll get money from them to do it, and they won't do it again and again and again, as long as politics are owned by billionaires. Capitalism needs to go. And by capitalism, I mean we need Marxism in the United States, and that's not going to happen. Instead, we're headed towards fascism. And I need to get the heck out of the country, but instead I'm talking about trying to buy very cheap homes in the middle of nowhere to survive, because Social Security is such low money, or because what am I going to do? I can't leave the country. I want to leave the country, but no one will accept a disabled refugee from a country that they're not giving political asylum to. I would have to get a work visa, and I'm too sick to get a work visa unless I can get a self-employment one from this channel. So let's go. Enough talk, more play, right? Boom. Oh, okay. I almost done training new infantry battalions, mostly because I need the manpower for aircraft, ships, and replacing losses from volunteer forces. I have a lot of... It's telling me... Wait, the scout plane isn't outdated. Oh, no, it's not. This is why... No, the dynamic numbering isn't working. That I did upgrade them. Give it a 5% higher agility, that's right. Alright. Well, I've got a lot of... I just finished these fighters. Let's get a couple more lines. These will go, I guess, Fighter Mark 8. Boom. As I reduce the aluminum consumption, I can actually start with industrial projects again. I can reduce my aluminum. In fact, I can do it now. Instead of spending a CIF for 5 aluminum. Cancel that purchase. I'll finish these anti-air guns in June. I'm going to swap to this port that I want for supply when pushing into Schleswig-Holstein. Speaking of getting away with less, I'm going to make that a level 3 naval base, not a 4. Alright, I'm going to make it a level 2. I can't afford, if I'm going to enter this war in reasonable time before it's won or lost, and get some puppets out of it and stuff. Get enough territorial gains to later contest whoever wins the war. Or there, you know. I'm gonna need to be substantial less. Air bases don't care about the level, but let's see. Southern Jutland is better for controlling the eastern North Sea, but Finn is better for. I think slightly better for. No, actually, it's around Odense. I think it's better for defending the whole miles. I probably need a level 3 in each. Level 1 can get bombed and can be completely not have a commission. And a level 2 will often get overcrowded with allied air wings if you join a faction. Level 3 is pretty minimal.